This sermon is basically the second part of the one I did 3 weeks ago, and this is the other side of that presentation. I'm going to basically cover just the surface of it. I'm gonna try to keep it within 30 minutes. We're not gonna go an hour this time. But basically, let's see. Okay. All right. We're going to read Daniel 11, 40 through 43, and then we're going to talk about it for just a second. All right. In Daniel 11, 40 through 43, it reads, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land." "And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps." Okay, let's go back to that first verse. Okay, when you read this, what do you see happening here? Because if you understand the prophecy, like when you read Daniel and you read Revelation, they basically mirror each other. They're the same prophecy, just one spoken from Daniel back in the Old Testament and Revelations in the New Testament. And it's talking about the king of the north and the king of the south. And just for a quick little history about this prophecy, the king of the north and the king of the south actually changes identity throughout the prophecy. And it starts in Greece, where you have, after Alexander the Great dies, he has 4 generals. But really, if I remember my history correctly, it really came down to 2 generals, and one was the north and one was from the south. And what they were trying to do is gain control over all of Greece. And so you had one, the king of the north is what's represented by the general from the north, and the king of the south was the general from the south. But then when you go out through this prophecy, that identity changes a couple of times. And one time it becomes Rome and Egypt, the actual countries. Then if you get to the end, Papal Rome and the Pope becomes the king of the north. And if you know your history, when the French Revolution happened, atheism, which represented basically denying God, just denying his authority and everything. That was what the king of the south became. And so when you read this text, it's more than just identities, though. It's talking about them warring against one another. So you have to ask yourself, if they're warring against one another, what are they warring against each other for? And if you understand what they're warring for, then you can begin to understand a little bit more about prophecy. Because if you understand that the last time prophecy ended in 1844, and then we know some of the events that's happening at the end of time, but it's very vague from that point till the Sunday law when it gets passed. And we live in that time, and it would be very nice to know how close we're getting to that decree that the Sunday law be passed. So when I started studying this, my whole thing was, if we know when the time prophecy ended in 1844, and we know that the time in the end, those events starts with the decree of the Sunday law, how do we know how close we are? Well, we understand in the battle, God's side. But when you explore what's happening on the opposite side, on our enemy side, it actually paints a very clear picture of where we're at. And that's what this whole part of this sermon is about. Now we're going to read Daniel 2, 41 through 44. "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed, And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to one another, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Okay. If you understand prophecy, what was happening with Greece, with Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, Rome? What was happening in those situations? They were trying to conquer the world, but they were trying to do it through military might, and they could not do it. Then Papal Rome came, and they tried to control it through basically putting the world in ignorance and through Christian persecution and that sort of thing. They tried to take over it that way. It didn't work. But during the time of the Middle Ages, where most of this sermon takes place, the blueprint for how to take over the world was discovered. And that's what's we're going to talk about next. But if you remember this slide from 3 weeks ago, we talked about the pagan attack, the king of the south. The king of the south took control when Napoleon's general took the Pope prisoner, and he took his powers away from him. That was the deadly wound. But they did not completely destroy the king of the north, and then he regained his power. That's what we're going to be talking about. But this sermon is about the Christian part of it. What's happening on the other side of this struggle? You have the king of the south, the king of the north. And we know from the Bible that the king of the north eventually wins this battle. So what is it that he does? What do he do to win this battle? And what is this battle? All right, here are the players. There's the Pope. There's the Knights Templar that was formed in the year 1119, but they were disbanded in the year 1312. Who are the Knights Templar? They're very important. We're going to talk about them. The Jesuits. The Jesuits are an order in the Catholic Church. They were formed on September the 27th in 1540, about around a little less than 200 years after the Templars were disbanded. Then you have Freemasonry. And I didn't talk about Freemasonry last time because I didn't have time to explain, and we're going to talk about that. This can be a very sensitive subject, so I wanted some time to talk about it. And the origins were around the 1600s, so about 100, a little less than 100 years after the Jesuits, the Freemasonry, the beginnings of Freemasonry started happening. And then you have what a lot of conspiracy people don't believe people don't believe conspiracy. Let me say it again. The Illuminati are what a lot of people think are conspiracy, that they don't exist. Actually, history begs to differ. There's actually historical record of when they were formed and what they were about. But we're going to talk about that as well. And they were formed on May 1st, 1776. All right? Important notes, like I was talking about. The French Revolution. The French Revolution was when the deadly wound was inflicted on the king of the north, and the king of the south took control of this battle when Napoleon's general arrested the Pope. But in 1844, the Congress of Vienna restored the papal estates to the Pope and also gave back the power to the Jesuits. And the Jesuits are the major force for which the Pope is going to regain, and the King of the North is going to regain his power. So, on one side you have the Pope and the Catholic Church, which is Christianity. And you have orders that existed in this church. The Knights Templar, the Jesuits. I mean, there were a bunch of different orders in the Catholic Church throughout the Middle Ages. On the King of the South, it's represented by the Illuminati, Freemasonry, atheism, all the pantheon of paganism that exists in the world. And these other names up here are just different secret societies that exist. Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg Group, KKK, the Mafia. And for those you don't know, the KKK and the Mafia were formed by Masons. That is a Masonic organization. You also have the other secret societies like the Orientis Templar. I forgot the name of it, but that's like a cult secret organization. And there's a whole list of all these organizations. We're going to talk about Masonry, but let's get this out the way. I have people in my own family that belong to Masonry. But they do not know what Masonry is all about. If you have family members or if you belong to Masonry, I encourage you or your family members to go to the libraries and go get the book Morals and Dogma, because Albert Pike, who was a high-ranking Mason, explains exactly what Masonry is all about. You need, like, most Masons do not read their own books and understand what they're in. Go read Morals and Dogma. He explains what it's all about. So, with that being said, 90% or more of Masons do not know what they're in. They think it's a Christian organization. So, when I talk about Masonry, I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about an organization. Like when we talk about the Catholic Church and the Pope, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about systems here. If the Illuminati is a platform, Masonry is the infrastructure through which all these organizations are operating as the King of the South. And if you remember from the sermon before, we talked about how they were using this New Age agenda to try to take over the world. And if you haven't, go back and watch that presentation about how they're trying to do it. But basically, they're trying to infiltrate governments and business and all the forms of power to do that. If you want to see a picture, this is what the Knights Templar, and we're going to talk about the Knights Templar first, but let me read some things about the Knights Templar. And a lot of this is just history, because if you remember, all this stuff has already happened. The Knights Templar, the poor, they were originally called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, commonly known as the Knights Templar or the Order of the Temple, or as simply Templars, were among the most wealthy and powerful of the Western Christian military orders, and were among the most prominent actors in the Christian finance. The organization existed for nearly 2 centuries during the Middle Ages. And if you remember the Crusades, this is where most people are going to remember the Templars from the Crusades. Officially endorsed by the Roman Catholic Church around 1129, the order became a favorite charity throughout Christendom and grew rapidly in membership and power. Templar Knights in their distinctive white mantles and with a red cross were among the most skilled fighting units of the Crusades. Non-combatant members of the order managed a large economic infrastructure throughout Christendom, innovating financial techniques that were an early form of banking, and building fortifications across Europe and the Holy Land. The Templars' existence was tied closely to the Crusades. When the Holy Land was lost, support for the order faded. Rumors about the Templar's secret initiation ceremony created mistrust, and King Philip IV of France, who was deeply in debt to the order, took advantage of the situation. In 1307, many of the order's members in France were arrested, tortured, and to give false confessions, and then burned at the stake. Under pressure from King Philip, Pope Clement V disbanded the order in 1312. The abrupt disappearance of a major part of the European infrastructure gave rise to speculation and legends, which have kept the Templar name alive in the modern day. Okay, what I'm going to do is in the Facebook group, I'm going to post some videos or links to the videos where you can actually learn all about the Knights Templar. It's a great documentary about them. But they are the key to which the King of the South, where they figured out how to take over the world. Because not that the Knights Templar themselves were a secret organization. Some argue that they were, but they were pretty public. But what they did back in the Middle Ages, in the early, like 1112 to 1312, I believe, I can't remember what the date was. What they did was they had to finance their war in the Holy Land. And so what they would do is, because across all the countries of Europe, and they had been accepted to the Catholic Church by the Pope and became an order, they actually started getting donations from wealthy individuals. So what a wealthy individual would do is he would give the Knights Templar a piece of land, and there would be buildings on that land, barns and different things. And what they figured out what they would do is that they would take that estate, instead of just sitting on it, they turned it into the center of like communities. They would build communities around it. And by doing that, they created an economic growth all throughout Europe, because every time they would get a new piece of property, they would create jobs and communities around it. Well, when they did this, they started gaining a lot of money. And what they would do, I believe the number was, they would take a third or a fourth, I can't remember what the percentage was, and send it to finance the war. Well, as time went on, they actually started operating as a bank, actually like a modern bank. And like I say, you can go read and learn all about how this happened, but they had a few characteristics about them that allowed them to do this. First of all, they were honest in their dealings. Like you deposit, they would give you your money back when you need it, that type of thing. They also had the manpower to protect the money because they were not holy knights. They were, warriors. So this allowed them to create the first modern banks. But they also had networks of friends throughout Europe. These were the people who were donating to them. And these were like kings and higher, officials all across of Europe. And basically, even the kings themselves became in debt to the Knights Templar. And so as the Holy War went on, when they were losing most of those battles and losing most of the territory, a lot of people started to distrust, wonder about the Knights Templar, because what started out as French knights, only, there's a picture of two knights on one horse showing that they were poor, but they were fighting this holy war as a way of, trying to serve God. Now all of a sudden they were rich and, they had so much power. People began to wonder, are you really fighting a holy war, or is it about the money? And then finally, as we read, King Philip found a way to get out of underneath his debt, and he encouraged the Pope to put them out of business. They are no longer around, supposedly, because they were disbanded. Many conspiracy theorists believe that the Knights Templar are actually, the Freemasonry are the Knights Templar. Whether they are or not, Masonry is formed around how they built their organizations, the Knights Templar. You find correlations between both. But they're not the only ones who saw this and saw a potential way to gain power throughout the world without using military might. Also, there was the Jesuits. The Jesuits is what this whole sermon is mostly about, because the Jesuits are part of the Catholic Church. And something happened in 2013 that has never happened before, that is of great significance. What happened in 2013? Yes. We have the first Jesuit Pope. That raises a lot of alarms, because what's happening now is that the Jesuits are basically in control of the church. Complete control. And I'm going to read some history on, wow, time just flying. Okay. I'm just going to read a part of this. The Society of Jesus is what the Jesuits are called, is a Christian male religious congregation of the Catholic Church. The members are called Jesuits. The society is engaged in evangelism and apostolic ministry in 112 nations on 6 continents. Jesuits work in education, funding schools, colleges, universities, and seminaries. Intellectual research and cultural pursuits. Jesuits also give retreats, minister in hospitals, parishes, and promote social justice and dialogue. Okay. On its surface, the Jesuits would be a great organization to belong to. But if you understand what the Jesuits really are truly about, it would change your whole perspective of what they're about. And I'm going to read to you, let's say a person goes into one of the schools of the Jesuits, and a high-ranking officer is going to initiate this person into the higher ranks of a Jesuit order. This is what he says to him before he gives his oath. When a Jesuit of the minor rank is to be elevated to command, he is conducted into the chapel of the covenant of the order, where there are only 3 others present, the principal or superior standing in front of the altar. On either side stands a monk, one whom holds a banner of yellow and white, which are the paper colors, and the other a black banner with a dagger and a red cross above a skull and crossbones, with the word INRI, and below them the words, I think this is Greek, so I'm not going to read them, but it's like Istium, Nikor, Regus, Impius. I mean, you get it. The meaning of which is, it is just to exterminate or annihilate impious or heretical kings, governments, and rulers. Upon the floor is a red cross, at which the postulant or candidate kneels. The superior hands him a small black crucifix, which he takes in his left hand and presses to his heart. And the superior at the same time presents him a dagger, which he grasps by the blade and holds the point against his heart, the superior still holding it by the hilt, and thus addresses the the candidate. This is what he says. My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man. Among the reformers, to be a reformer. Among the Huguenots, to be a Huguenot. Among the Calvinists, to be a Calvinist. Among other Protestants, generally to be a Protestant, and obtaining their confidence, to seek even to preach from their pulpits, and to denounce with all the vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope, even to descend so low as to become a Jew among Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order, as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with the combatants and to act secretly with your brother Jesuit who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that which you might be connected. Only that the church might be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. You have been taught your duty as a spy to gather all statistics, facts, information in your power from every source, to ingratiate yourself into the confidence of the family circle of Protestants and heretics of every class and character, as well as that of the merchant, the banker, the lawyer among the schools and universities, in parliaments and legislatures, and the judiciaries and councils of state, and to be all things to all men for the Pope's sake, whose servant we are unto death. You have received all your instructions hereto as a novice, and I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, and then he goes and takes his oath. Did you hear the language that they're using here? Yeah, exactly. Brothers and sisters, Jesuits, what they do is they infiltrate governments, business, churches, religions, pagan religions. It does not matter. They're all across the globe. They infiltrate and become one of you so that they can manipulate things to happen for the purposes of the church. That is what a Jesuit does. Our Pope is now, well, our Pope. The Pope is a Jesuit. They take an oath to the general, who is also called the Black Pope. So, just for fun, who's really running the show here, the Black Pope or the real Pope? Because who's serving who here? So, if you understand that, they do this because of the Templars, because they realize through networking and through position, having people in power that do what you say, they can actually control everything. That's what they do. But out of the Jesuit order, people wonder, what is the connection between the Jesuits and Freemasonry? Because the Freemasons did the same thing. They're trying to control the world by infiltrating all these positions. They got this from the Templars, because not exactly, but they took the model and they applied it. And through secrecy and deception, they are infiltrating, trying to gain control of all the power and the money in the world so that they can control everything. This is the king of the South, the Jesuits, the king of the North. Both powers trying to gain control over the whole world. So now you can see that they are actually in opposition to one another. They're fighting over the world. And they're using similar tactics to do it. So what is Freemasonry? I'm not going to read everything because we're out of time. Basically, Freemasonry started out kind of like the Illuminati started out, kind of with a good cause. They were basically stonemasons who came together and formed this organization, and they helped each other. It was a secret society, but it wasn't sinister. It was around in the 1800s that when it started changing its nature. And the Illuminati kind of started out the same way, but it changed its nature as well. What they did is Freemasons, they hold each other, they're loyal to one another before country, before anyone else. That's basically one of the reasons why people get in it. They're getting it because there's economic gain to get out of it. It's a way of networking with the people and the powers that to be. Most people think it's a Christian organization. If you study any kind of Masonry, you know it is not a Christian organization. You're not even allowed to say the name Jesus Christ in the lodge, period. You can say God, you cannot say Jesus Christ. So, and then you take an oath that's blasphemous when you get initiated. So, it goes on and on. We're not going to get into that because this really isn't about Masonry. Okay. That's the last one. But the Illuminati, this is where it gets interesting. The Illuminati was formed by a man named Johann Adam Weishaupt in February 6, 1948. He was a German philosopher and founded the secret society, the Order of the Illuminati. One day in May, in 1776, he founded the Illuminati in the Electorate of Bavaria. I don't know what country it is. He adopted the name Brother Spartacus within the order. Although the order was not egalitarian or democratic internally, it sought to promote the doctrines of equality and freedom throughout society. The actual character of the society was an elaborate network of spies and counter-spies. Each isolate cell initiates report to a superior whom they did not know, a party structure that was effectively adopted by some later groups. Here's the connection. He was a Jesuit. He was raised a Jesuit. He broke apart from the Jesuits because for various reasons, and he started this order. But what he did is he joined the Masonry. And from Masonry, he recruited Masons to be a part of his order. So semi-quasi-Masonic, but it had different agendas. And then I forgot what the date was, but it was disbanded. He died, and basically that ended the original Illuminati. What's happened is that others took up the banner. And what you have is in Masonry, you have 33 degrees, if you know anything about Masonry. But what most Masons don't know is that once you hit that top degree, there are other organizations inside of Masonry. There's secret societies inside the secret society. So the Illuminati being the top. Then you have like the Ordo, Orientis, and a whole bunch of different other ones that are inside that you can belong to if you be ranked above that. And generally you have to be someone of power, of fame, of somebody of value to them. But what the Illuminati are today are the wealthy, the richest and wealthy of the world, trying to gain control of the world. And I'm not going to go into all the stuff. A lot of it's conspiracy, but a lot of it's truth. So what's happened is you have the King of the South trying to take control of the world through the infrastructure that is Masonry, which is that network. That's all it really comes down to, is being a network. It's an infrastructure through which these other organizations build their platforms, recruit their members that have money, that have power, that have fame, and these are pagans. These aren't Christians. These are magicians and occultists and things of that nature. These are religions in and of themselves, and they're basically recruiting from Masonry. So you have a lot of Masons that they'll move up the ranks, but they'll never ever get invited to this kind of thing. And they really do. Some do a lot of good in the community. Okay, so I mean, I'm not saying Masons are bad. It's just that you got to understand what the organization is. It is the platform. So, if you read prophecy, how does the King of the North win this battle? How does he do it? The answer is found with the Jesuits. Because what do the Jesuits do? They infiltrate. What are they doing now? They actually are infiltrating Masonry. Why recreate the wheel? If it's already working, why recreate it? They are infiltrating Masonry all the way up to the top levels, the Illuminati, which is the top order in there, to gain control over it. And when they do, the New Age, remember all that New Age movement stuff we talked about 2 weeks ago? One currency, one world currency, one world religion, all those things. I didn't bring a slide. That's how they're going to get control over all that, because that's what they're doing. They're infiltrating this big infrastructure that's called Masonry. That's how they win. So let's read Daniel 2:44 again. And in these days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to one other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Basically, when the Pope and the King of the North gains control, that's when you're going to start seeing the decrees. That's when you're going to see the Sunday law come into observance, because he's right now trying to bring all the Protestant religions back into the fold. That's what that video was about with Doug Batchelor. He is reaching out across the ocean to the Protestants and saying, come home. And that's the one world religion. He wants to bring everyone back underneath Christianity, the King of the North. When he does that and he gains control over Freemasonry, that infrastructure and the powers, these are presidents and kings and the leaders of countries. Once he gets that control, then in that one world currency, which we believe is a digital currency, which is how he can stop you from buying and selling. If it's a digital currency like Bitcoins, you can't buy or sell if they freeze your account, which is not hard for them to do. That's how he gains control. That's when you're going to start seeing these last decrees. That's how it's happening. That's why when I did this study, I was trying to find out what are the events that's happening in that vague time period from the last prophecy to that decree. That's what's happening. It's secret societies fighting against secret societies. It's lies and deception fighting lies and deception. But one is going to win, and we know that's the King of the North. All right, I kept it under 30 minutes. And believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just very broad, surface level material. This goes so deep, and it gets dark, and you have to stop yourself. Like I said, I had to stop because I was like, wow, I don't want to know anymore. But that's how deep, and this is not just starting. It started way back. The devil's been working on this from the beginning. It started way before Egypt, and it's been going on to now. All right, thank you. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, you are in control, and we love and trust you, but we know that these things have to come to pass. We know that the end time events are going to happen, and we ask that you be with us and prepare us for those times. Help us to keep our eyes open and to be able to see these events unfolding before us so that we can be prepared and we can warn others. And Lord, we ask for all of this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.